Zaharan blasted himself here. He came to offer us. ගරු මූලාසනාරූඪ මන්ත්‍රීතුමනි මම මුලින්ම අද දින වෙනත් රජයේ කටයුතු තිබියදීත් මෙම විවාදයට ඉඩ ලබා දීම පිළිබඳව රජයටත් ඒ වගේම මේ සඳහා ඉල්ලුම් කරපු මන්ත්‍රීවරුන්ටත් මගේ ස්තුතිය පුද කර සිටිනවා. Mr. Presiding Member, today we are having a momentous debate on the developing situation in the occupied Palestine. We are witnessing the relentless onslaught unleashed by the State of Israel on Palestinian people under the pretext of self-defense, with sustained force killing thousands of people already, including the attack on a hospital in Gaza, committing untold misery and blatant war crime. The trapped 2.1 million people in the Gaza have endured relentless bombardment by Israeli forces. And this unrelenting bombings and massacres of innocent Palestinians is raging on. Children just born are bombed out. Women and old people are killed while benumbed by the horror of falling white phosphorus bombs. Residential buildings are deliberately flattened. Mosques, churches, schools and hospitals are reduced to rubble. Electricity and water supply have been cut off. The people of Gaza are living and dying in the dark while an indifferent world is content to watch in silence. With the active encouragement of the United States and the studied indifference of Western governments, nurtured by self-interest, Israel is violating all international norms. The horrendous violations of human rights and humanitarian law, including war crime perpetrated by the Israeli government and the unconscionably abusive Israeli practices against Palestinian people, continuing with increasing intensity in Gaza, shock the conscience of the world each passing day. Sadly, some of the Western states never cease to encourage the current Israeli government to go in a direction that only heralds a slow-motion genocide. It is apparently intended to empty the Gaza Strip of Palestinian people, to make room for Israeli annexation of Palestinian territories in the near future. Even as some of the Western states and others stand with the most ruthless and repressive occupier in the Middle East, it is abundantly evident, nevertheless, that the ongoing massive public protests in those countries clearly expose the unpalatable reality of deepening divides between the people and their governments on the issue of support for the racist policies of the current Israeli government. It is a conundrum that in a world that is becoming increasingly polarized over geostrategic contestation that admittedly shift the center of global power to Asia, the Western states that support the current Israeli government should help that shift even faster at the risk of domestic instability and loss of international credibility. Already the economic cost of their support for ongoing Israeli military action in Gaza are visible, and an energy crisis is looming large on the horizon. I refer to Chinese diplomacy in the Middle East in the recent past. They made a historic attempt to bring the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Iran together and have persuaded them to open diplomatic relations. This is a big milestone in Middle Eastern history. This is why I'm saying the shift toward Asia and its good intentions and shift in the global power equation may change in the coming days. Why did Hamas do this horrendous act on the October 7th? We acknowledge that quite apart from ultra-rightist extremists, Israel is a land that is home to many right-thinking, decent people and an unbelievable number of intellectually forthright writers, politicians and activists. They too ask the same question. These learned Jews to agree that 2 million people living for more than 20 years in the world's largest open-air prison, suffering daily humiliation and harassment, could be compelling reason for this sudden eruption. Just a few days ago, Netanyahu, current Israeli Prime Minister, was a cocky maverick who was attempting to undermine Israel's vibrant democracy with legislation to emasculate its Supreme Court. Today, he is a wounded warrior. By this incredulous audacity and equally stupefying barbarity, Hamas has stunned Israel and the world, doing immeasurable damage to Israel's repute as an impregnable state with its unbeatable intelligence system. We must not gloat on it because no matter what, the Hamas act has caused immeasurable misery to the Palestinian people. We concede that. It is time for the world to take note of the tragedy of the people of Palestine. Palestine. The world can no longer be indifferent. Arab nations cannot ignore the plight of the homeless Palestinian people in their own historical homeland. I would like here, Honourable Presiding Member, to recall a meeting I had with the late Yasser Arafat when he visited Sri Lanka. It was a time of the Chandrika Bandaranayake Kumaratunga government. The late Yasser Arafat, Mr. Yasser Arafat, when I asked him, what do you advise? At that time, we were also having a raging civil war in our country. Mr. Yasser Arafat responded to my question. He said, young man, you have to be brave to fight a war, but yet you have to be even more courageous to pursue peace. And this is what Yasser Arafat told me when I asked him what his advice was for us, since we also are having a war with terror unleashed by a belligerent group in our country. Without Israeli terror, the terror of Hamas cannot exist. If the world community of nations wish to make Hamas irrelevant, it must convince the spoiled and pampered government of Benjamin Netanyahu to make the Palestine Liberation Organization that signed the Oslo Accord relevant. Is it happening? No. Now look at this. Yesterday's Times of Israel on the 19th of October has published an op-ed article that offers a huge dose of common sense, which incidentally has some remarkable lessons for us Sri Lankans as well. I would like to quote it at some length. The title is, I quote, "For years Netanyahu propped up Hamas. Now it's blown up in our faces." I quote, "For years the various governments led by Benjamin Netanyahu took an approach that divided power between Gaza Strip and the West Bank, bringing Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas to his knees while making moves that propped up Hamas's terror group." This is a type of intelligence operation that Israelis are engaging in. I have some other matters concerning our own country. I must quote here. Now, today in the Daily Mirror, or rather the Daily News, there is this article, Latest Gaza War, Israeli-Palestinian Conflict. A very neutral kind of line. But the article is not very neutral. Article is by no less than person known as Professor Rohan Gunnaratne. I have questioned the credentials of him being a professor. That's a different matter. I have had a long argument with him in one of our committee rooms. Now, his bias is quite apparent in the article. But of course, I must say, there are certain matters where he refers to certain factual situations in the Middle Eastern theatre. But then he is not neutral in the way he is describing, because this is his own. He is looking at it, let the issue from his lens. You know, he had his special lens put on when Zaharan blasted himself here. He came to offer us advice as to how to tackle Zaharan, right? I remember very clearly, I met the leader of the Catholics in this country along with Minister Kabir Hashim and Minister Fauzi. When we met, the Cardinal very clearly told us, why are you all being worried and sorry about this situation? I know the Muslims in this country are not responsible for it. And we must, of course, thank the Cardinal for his initial action in preventing backlash against the Muslims in the country by his astute stand. He told us one more thing. I have a suspicion, he said. The witness is here, Mr. Fauzi and Kabir Hashim, my colleague. I think Shad Badiuddin also was there. He said, this is the work of a state in Middle East. The Israelis are behind this. This was his suspicion, the very outset. And I'll tell you, for that, now Mr. Rohan Gunnaratne and his article is talking about Mossad and their operations and their intelligence expertise and its wide network. Now here, this is a report of the Commission of Inquiry to investigate and inquire into report or take necessary action on the bomb attacks on the 21st of April 2019. The report by the Commission headed by His Lordship Justice Janak de Silva. Now, at page 106, the Commission says this. It appears that Zaharan was vigilant of people who may pretend to be IS supporters, but are in fact intelligence operative. On the 10th of October 2018, Zaharan issued a letter on his Facebook account claiming that a person called Pakkam bin Abu, who maintains a Facebook account and by that name, and he talks about him being an intelligence operative of a foreign state, and then give information about them to these intelligence agencies. In response, Pakkam bin Abu has on the 11th of October 2018 claimed that Zaharan was an agent of Israeli intelligence and that although he tries to project himself as a hero by attracting youth towards the IS ideology, he is in fact equal to a lady. This reference to Israeli intelligence. He is a paid agent of the Israeli intelligence. This is the report of the Presidential Commission. This has been referred to. And this is the very thing the Cardinal told us when we met him for the first time. Because his suspicion was also such. Why did otherwise, what did we have against the Christians in this country? The Muslims? Why should the Muslims be pitted against the Christians with a bomb attack on their holiest of churches in different places? Hotels, the tourists, right? And why was certain hotels attacked and certain hotels not? On the Easter Sunday, the most holiest of days. Now this is something that we must understand. Israelis, wherever they go, for their survival, they have long-term plans. And this is what has happened happened even in our country. We were all, ever. This is the question I asked even when we had debates on the Easter Sunday attacks. In this country, LTT terror was there. Of course, the JVP terror was there. Both the Tamils and the Sinhalese are resorted to terror, assert their political objective. But what was the political objective for the Muslim? None. Did the Muslim community now, up to date, JVP celebrates Vijay Veera as a hero, as their leader. Ilmahaviru Dinaya, they celebrate that. Prabhakaran's death has not silenced the extremists on the Tamil side. He is still remembered. They are celebrating every year during his birthday is being celebrated by the Tamils. But are the Muslims ever even lighting a candle or leave alone candle? Did we ever even pray janaza prayers for these dastardly terrorists, Zaharan? No, that's the difference. This is the difference we fail to understand. This is why we say that though these prophets of doom, like Professor Gunratna, can give all kinds of different arguments to prop up this idea of ISIS intruding into Sri Lanka, all that is bunkum. All that was done to divide the Muslim and Catholics and succeed in a political project to bring their friends to power. Today, Mr. Sarath Veerasekara was talking about the immense help the Israelis have given to armed forces, training them. I still remember what happened in the 80s, mid-80s. There was this talk about Israelis on one side training the Tamil militant and the other side training the Sri Lankan armed forces. They were simultaneously training both of them. This cardinal himself reminded us when we met him. This is what the Israelis have been doing. So the land of Palestine, which is sacred to the three revealed religions, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, the holiest of shrines, all of us, we have our divisions, we have our worries about Jerusalem and its future. But then, atrocious attempt by the Israeli government. See the disproportionate power between one of the world's best equipped armies and a ragtag terrorist organization. Of course, terror must be condemned on all sides. We are not upholding, we are not celebrating what the Hamas did. But then all the oppressed people all over the world are emboldened by what has happened to the most well-equipped, powerful Israeli defense forces on that critical day. We condemn the barbarism of it. We condemn those innocent people. We condemn the attack on those innocent Israelis. There are right-thinking Israelis who are now holding rallies in the American cities, in the US cities. Shameful. US president is visiting Tel Aviv and endorsing what Israel is doing, and followed by the British Prime Minister. And these are the people who are now telling, well, we will allow Egyptians to open humanitarian assistance to flow in, right? But what has happened? Up to now, people are dying in thousands. They are looking away. So in this situation, it is important for Sri Lanka to realize that though we may be far from the theatre of war, right? Even our country had been messed up by these devious designs of a Zionist regime. Therefore, let me say, in this context, it beckons any reasonable person to ask the following questions in relation to Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Who told Israelis that when they destroy a part of the population under occupation while invoking the principle of proportionality, however remote the application of that principle is from the real harm sustained by them, does it not amount to genocide? Who told Israelis that the excesses they commit beyond the ambit of the principles of proportionality, necessity and distinction could still be justified, saying it is collateral damage suffered by the victims? Mr. Presiding Member, who told Israelis that when a group of people under occupation resists the continuing tyranny of occupation as well as the Israeli practices denying them their right to life, land, liberty and freedoms, and response to continuing provocations, what that group engages is only terrorism? Who told Israelis that the UN Security Council would never be allowed to adopt a resolution calling for a ceasefire or a humanitarian corridor in Gaza to rush humanitarian assistance to the affected population because such a decision would only strengthen or reward terrorism? We also weep for the Israeli people who suffered in the carnage of the 7th of October. I conclude by echoing the words of the organization Jewish Voice for Peace. The loss of Israeli lives should not be used to perpetrate a new genocide or to seek moral cover for the immoral demand for innocent Palestinian lives and their land. Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member.
உடனுக்குடன் செய்திகளை பெற்றுக்கொள்ள UTVயின் யூடியூப் தளத்தை சப்ஸ்கிரைப் செய்து கொள்வதுடன் பெல் ஐகானை அழுத்தவும்.